Hey, that looks like Chris. Hey, man, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
All right, you're coming through loud and clear. How's business today?
Good. What about you?
Shiny, my man. Very shiny.
Thanks for willing to do this.
Of course, man. I checked out your playlist. You have quite the collection of
Yeah,
interviews under your belt. How long you been doing this?
3.5 years.
Nice. Let's get bananas. This is your interview. Let's go.
Well, the first thing I can ask is, do you have a special story of how you got into SAG?
I got into SAG filming an NCAA commercial. I was in a courtroom fencing. It was a very artistic interpretation. I taught fencing for 5 years, so
Oh,
I got picked up, brought in to do that gig, and from there on, they're like, "You're in." I started out in entertainment as kind of an actor stuntman, so I was doing lots of that physical work, and then I'd always been fascinated by voiceover. So I finally, because I'm here in LA, found one of the many places that bring you in for group classes, started to do that and went, this is amazing. Auditioned. I booked the very first thing I ever auditioned for and went, oh, I should do a lot more of this.
do you still actively do stunt work too, though?
I do. Not as much as I used to. But that stunt background plus voiceover has opened up a lot of opportunities in motion capture. So I've been doing a lot more motion capture recently, which is such a blast.
What about, would Fire Emblem be the first like anime kind of property that you worked on?
Almost. I was training at a studio called ITA over on the west side, and one of the people in that class was Stephanie Shea, who is a celebrated voice actress, and we were buddies. So I said, "Hey, I'm doing a lot more voiceover now." She says, "All right, have you ever done anime?" No. She's like, "All right, come to me." So she let me do some incidentals in
Oh,
Mobile
yeah.
Suit Gundam. Yeah. And I realized just how much I did not know about that world. So I was like, okay, I have much to learn about dubbing, about anime, that kind of thing, which led to more training, getting to know more and more people. And then, yeah, probably the first thing where, oh, I'm a named character would be Fire Emblem.
So it would have been the three houses with Balthus first.
It actually started in Fire Emblem Heroes.
Okay.
Um, Patrick Seitz, who
Yep.
was the director for, yeah, for a lot of the Fire Emblem stuff, I was reading something else there, and he said, "Hey, why don't you read for this?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." So he's the one because I had trained with him at another place. He's like, "Yeah, I think you'd be good for this." So he brought me in to read for Gerik, and that was my first Fire Emblem Heroes character. I was like, oh, "Okay, that was a lot of fun." And while I was there recording that, they're like, "Here's some other things to read for," and one of them ended up being Balthus, who is such a blast of a character to get to play. So I recorded Gerik. And then later they called me in to record Heath and someone else. And because it was on a separate day, I didn't remember what I had done for Gerik, but I got re recorded by somebody else because Gerik and the other character, I forget who it is now, were basically the exact same voice.
Oh.
I was like, oh, I didn't. Well, I didn't vary that at all. But yeah, if you listen to them back to back, because both of those characters released at the same time, they're like, oh, this is identical. We need to bring someone else in. So I got replaced for that other character. But Balthus is by far the most fun because how often do you get to read for the the most giga of Chads, the most beloved himbo in a vast and expansive universe of characters? A lot of credit goes to Patrick Seitz for really dialing in who Balthus was because I don't know anything about Fire Emblem. When I show up, he's like, okay, here's kind of this character's vibe. Here's the story you're in. Go. Okay, let's do it. But I really credit him for because he has the 10,000 foot overview of everything that's happening. So he really helps. Okay, he's like, okay, you know what? You can be a little more hyped up in this situation. Let's tone this half down. And he gave me fun little physical gestures that kept getting worked into Balthus. Like anytime he's like teasing somebody or calling him pal, he's like, hey, imagine just give him like a low back of the hand slap, like to the leg. Like, yeah, how's it going, pal? So that kind of stuff. And every time you say king of grappling, make sure you flex. Like, okay, you got it.
Well, in terms of developing Balthus's voice, was there any reference to the Japanese, or was it just free to come up with?
They sometimes play the Japanese, mostly for like initial reference and vibe, but more often they'll play it for timing. Like, hey, so this needs to fit into point 0.6 between point 0.7 times. So you just got to listen to it, get that timing, and then get your English version in. But I don't know. Yeah, they must have played it for me probably the first day. And after that, Patrick said, that's Balthus right there. We're going to stick in that zone and let's go. And you know how much dialogue is in that game. So there's multiple sessions for hours. So every time you show up again for a new session, they play you reference of what you did last time. You're like, that's Balthus. Okay, let's go.
Was it easy for you to personally relate to him with anything?
Personally relate? Well, I always do fancy myself a braggart, larger than life. So that was just really fun to lean into. But really, the writing that they did for that character does so much of the heavy lifting, telling that story. After Gerik was, my first character, I downloaded Fire Emblem Heroes and played that for a while. I was like, oh wow, that's my character. That's him being attacked, and now I'm dead because I wasn't very good at the game. But I didn't get to play Fire Emblem 3 Heroes. But after the game was officially announced and out, they're like, hey guys, the community has already posted videos of every dialogue option for all of our characters. So all of us in the Ashen Wolves knew immediately when, like, oh, the game is dropped. And there's already videos up because, of course, there are. Because people will day one that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to go back and listen and just hear how it all tied together and then go, oh, like, you hear people's voice and you're like, Jennifer Losi. I didn't know we were buddies in Fire Emblem Heroes. Like, that's amazing. And then that's Alejandro. We were action bros. I had no idea, man. So a lot of that was really fun to discover after the fact how many of your friends worked on the same project. Because unless they've recorded before you, where they're playing the dialogue and they can play their lines for you to answer to, you sometimes never get to hear them until the game is dropped. When did you start Fire Emblem?
I've been following it well, I've been doing interviews like for the community for it for like, I don't know, almost when I started doing interviews, but I've been a fan of the franchise for, I don't know, since I was a teenager, probably.
Awesome. Who's your favorite Ashen Wolf?
Uh, I mean, I do like Yuri a lot, but I mean,
Oh
Yuri
yeah,
and Balthus for sure.
Yuri's a powerhouse.
Do you have a favorite support that Balthus has with other characters?
Oh, yeah. The ones between Yuri and Balthus were a lot of fun. That whole action bro sequence,
Hmm.
yeah, ended up being really silly, really hilarious. Their little banter while they're making bets. Balthus exhausting himself trying to puzzle out mysteries that Yuri has put before him. A lot of fun. But they did take a lot of care in that room because it's not just Patrick Seitz there as the voice director. There's another team of 3 people in there whose whole job is making sure it's consistent to the story, that it's been adapted properly for the English speaking market. And so they'll go through and they'll do lines and they'll go, you know what? This line really makes Balthus sound like a creep. So we're gonna come back to this one later. So we'll come back for re-records and they're like, okay, we fixed it. He's gonna be he's not going to be disturbing saying something this way. We fixed it. I was like, oh, okay. You guys are looking out for Balthus. They put a great deal of care into presenting all these characters faithfully to the original story and yet adapting it so it doesn't like translated that has a weird connotation. Let's rework it.
Hmm. What about when you got to come back to play Balthus in the sequel to Three Houses, Three Hopes?
Three Hopes. That one was a lot of fun because if I get called in, um, oftentimes I'll show up and they just have the bear. It's under code names, so you have the barest details. Like I'm not even really sure what I'm reading for. They're like, it's a recurring character. I'm like, okay. There's a 1 in 4 chance it's Balthus. Showed up and I was like, yes, more Balthus time. The return of the undisputed king of grappling. Yeah, but all new dialogue with a whole new host of characters that I had never met before. I'm like, oh, who's this one? Like, oh, that's the ruler of this nation. Oh, who's this one? This is Edelgard. She's kind of a big deal. Oh, okay, you got it. I think there was one part like, hey, so you're going to do kind of an impression of this guy named Hubert. I'm like,
Yes.
okay, who's that? And then so they're like, okay, we're going to play you a voice reference. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I think we did two versions. One where I tried to do like an imitation of the Hubert voice as I heard it for the first time, and they're like, okay, maybe Balthus isn't really good at impressions, so do a bad impression too. I was like, okay, I did a bad one, and I think they ended up taking the good one. And it wasn't till after I had listened back to it and went, was that Robbie Damon? Oh, I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's very cool. So that was a lot of fun, but that was a lot faster
Hmm.
because I don't think there was as as much to do as there was introducing those characters in um, Three Houses. But still, an absolute blast to come back to Balthus because he's the most fun by far. He is the most fun character. I believe that I had the most entertaining character from my personal and humble opinion.
Hmm. How do you think the three of them would interact? Balthus, Gerik, and Heath.
Oh wow. I think Balthus and Gerik would get along instantly because they both are the gambler types. So I think instantly Balthus would start losing all of his money to Gerik. I think Heath would be kind of in the same vein as Yuri a little bit, like I'm above this just enough, but I think I find you entertaining enough that I'll hang around and because I want to see how this plays out.
Hmm. How did you end up getting Gemma Garrison then in that game?
Oh, that was one of those days I showed up and was recording uh like our third round of Balthus dialogue, and they say, "Hey, while you're here, why don't you read for a couple things for us?" And just came through, and I already had the Balthus voice almost in my mind, so I was just doing that. They're like, "He's not, he's not as fun. Okay, just take it down. He's quite a bit more serious." I'm like, "Oh, okay," but still kind of that same vocal quality throughout because like very similar build, very similar role, like protector, brawler. So it was the exact same studio. I love recording at that studio because every time I go in, they're like, "Hey, read for something else." Yeah, that place is a lot of fun. I've worked there a lot, and I really appreciate all the people there. You meet some very cool people in this business.
Hmm. Are you mostly just using your natural voice for characters often?
As much as you can, use your natural voice. It's the easiest to sustain. It's the one that you're most familiar with instantly. But yes, you will do projects where it is just absolutely bananas. Because I don't naturally talk like Balthus anyway. There is a lot of affectation and cadence to his speech. There's a lot of like bravado and broy qualities about him. So it's kind of my voice, just heightened and having the dial turned way up. But as much as you can get away with your natural voice, do it.
What do you think the case is where you've had to alter it the most for any role?
There was late last year an animation project I worked on that's not released yet. But I showed up and they say, okay, we're going to have you do one of these cartoon sportscasters. Okay, cool. Like, can you do both? Sure, I can do both. That'll be fun. I was like, do you want me to do like all of them just wild, just one guy and then the other guy as scripted? They're like, do whatever you want. So I started like bantering with myself and these two very different announcer voices. And they're like, just go, have fun, just start making up stuff. And that's some of the most creatively exciting stuff to do because now I'm having this insane dialogue with myself. I can see the people outside the booth just laughing. They're like, oh my God, that was so much fun. Can you read one of the old men for us? I was like, of course I can. And I thought it was going to be a one off old man. Like, okay, so this is a guy they meet in one place. So I've already been like super hyped, like yelling at myself in these sportscaster voices. And now I'm a cartoon old man. So I put on my cartoon old man voice, which is a little more it's more exhausting. I'll just put it that way. And they're like, great, moving on to his next scene. Oh, he's got another scene. Okay, let's do that one. Great, moving on his I was like, wait. And they're like, oh, this is a character throughout the series. I went, oh no, I've chosen the most exhausting voice I can think of to do for this entire series. And as it goes on, he just gets more and more hype and insane until he's finally just yelling and screaming. And at that point, I went, I have chosen this voice poorly. This will be exhausting upon my person.
Do you have anything to say to the Fire Emblem like community then, the fan base?
What is this going to be like a Fiverr or like one of those celebrity cameos? Do you want Balthus to say something to the Fire Emblem community?
Oh, I mean, if you want to, that's fine. But I was just asking, like, as you.
As me, I've been super impressed at the Fire Emblem community. I didn't know about it, but just seeing how involved and how deep they will dive into not just, the strategies and tactics and builds for every character, but they also get the lore. They understand immediately like if you're going to pair these characters up like, "Oh, this is going to be a fun bonding experience." And the game goes way deeper than it needs to. You can take your people to sing in the choir. You can go on horseback riding adventures. You can just have picnics with them. I was like, this game goes in depth. And you know what? The community is here for it. So, oh hey, Fire Emblem community. This is the illustrious king of grappling. Just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chris.
So, is there anything else that you're part of that's upcoming that you can safely talk about, or?
Safely talk about only what's already been released. The new Yakuza game was just released, I think, a couple weeks ago. And that's another studio that I've gotten to work for who are just awesome people. They're wonderful. And they've been good enough to say, hey, yeah, please come in. We have to translate all of the Yakuza games into English. Let's do it. And the latest one was just released. That was a lot of fun. Another thing that just came out was, have you heard of Remnant 2?
Oh yeah.
So that game, they called me in to do motion capture for the cinematics trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And so me and my mocap mentor, Richard Dorton, we showed up and they brought in one more person and all three of us played every single character in that trailer. So it was quite a bit of like, okay, now you're the gunslinger. You're going to be the animal tamer and you're the tank. they tell my buddy Richard because he's just a big dude. Like, great, now you're the healer, now you're the monster, and you're the big bad floating in the sky. Awesome, let's go. So that's a blast of a day to have to change it up so much and to do fight sequences with yourself. Because if it's the three heroes traveling through, killing monsters all along the way, we got to have all three of us do it. Then all three of us do it as the monsters, either switching out and pairing up different groups. So as big as a scene you see, it's three people doing everybody in that trailer. Oh,
Oh,
another big one that came out not as recently, but all the expansion packs for Midnight Suns.
okay.
Yeah, my the first time I got to play a Marvel superhero was in that. Got called in to play Deadpool. And that was a blast to show up and listen and be like, oh, that's Nolan North voicing it. So I get to do all of the Deadpool movements to Nolan North's dialogue
Wow, yeah.
for all of the expansions for that game. And they're like, the mocap director on that was so cool. He called me after we had shot everything. I was like, oh, well, hey man, how's it going? He's like, I want you to know they loved what you did so much. We were just going to do previs, but they're rolling everything you did straight into finals. I went, oh, wow. He said, not only that, I don't care what we're doing next. I'm bringing you in for it. And so from there, I got to be Spider-Man, Dracula, Mephisto, uh, Morbius, the living vampire. So,
Wow.
plus every bad guy you beat up for all of the cinematics. So the child in me was delighted to go, oh, I get to portray Deadpool? This is the coolest thing I've ever done.
Well, my final question is always asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
His ego was unlimited and completely unwarranted. I haven't thought about the legacy I want to leave. I hope just people say, oh, he had fun. As long as whatever I do, like, oh, okay, yeah, he definitely had fun, then I'll consider that good job for me. Yeah, other projects I can't talk about because they're not out yet, but we're developing a game right now from scratch. And hearing like this game won't be out for 3, maybe 4 years, but we're creating so like the initial data that's getting transferred. So as they continue to developing, we're brought in to further develop everything because they're like, we want to create just a massive world full of weird and interesting characters. So we're helping create all of that right now. But I won't be able to talk about it until 2028.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that we got to do this.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Hey, who's next on your docket? Who's the white whale that you're looking to catch for your next interview?
I don't know yet. I'm sure it'll probably be another cast member from Fire Emblem because the last two so far this year have been as well. So it just depends.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you have to feed your community, man. They're hungry for Fire Emblem content.
Yeah.
Hey, and let the developers know that you need more Balthus in your games.
Yeah. Well,
We appreciate it. Well, thanks, man. This is a lot of fun.
yeah. Have a good rest of your day then.
All right, you rock steady now.
Bye.